Yes, the alleged assassin Vance Boelter has pleaded guilty.
Sunday will mark 1 year since former Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were murdered in their home.
And Northern News Now's Quinn Gorham has reaction from federal prosecutors to today's plea change.
The murders of Speaker of the House Melissa Hortman and Mark Hortman, shooting of Senator John Hoffman and Yvette Hoffman, and the attempted shooting of Hope Hoffman are among the worst political violence crimes that we have seen.
U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen, alongside law enforcement leaders, announced Thursday that Vance Boelter had pleaded guilty to all 6 federal charges leveled against him.
Today, the United States achieved the admissions and the agreement necessary for the perpetrator of those crimes to spend the rest of his life in prison without possibility of release.
Boelter will serve 2 life sentences plus 40 years. The sentence represents the absolute maximum for the charges he was presented with. Rosen says the plea rules out the death penalty, but that the plea ensures Boelter will remain behind bars for life.
To ensure that he never sees freedom again in his entire life. That was an opportunity that we just could not pass up.
In a hearing earlier in the day, Boelter laid out details of the June 14th attack, where he impersonated a law enforcement officer and entered the Hortmans' home before killing them. Rosen remarked on the brutality of Boelter's attack.
I wonder if any of us who live law-abiding lives will ever really be able to understand that sort of motivation.
Reporting in Minneapolis, I'm Quinn Gorham.
Boelter also faces 7 state charges, and with his plea now entered in federal court, Hennepin County prosecutors say they will now ask the U.S. Attorney's Office to transfer Boelter into their custody.
Well, tonight, Senator John Hoffman and his family issuing this statement after the guilty plea, saying in part, there is no justice for Mark and Melissa Hortman, and there is not justice when our family and our state will never truly heal. The family went on to say that they are choosing to move forward with serving their community in public service. Senator Hoffman's family also filed a civil lawsuit against Boelter in April, seeking the maximum damages permitted by law.
Boelter's attacks last year sparked conversations about political violence and lawmakers' safety in the state and across the country. Northern News Now, Sophia Lauber heard from lawmakers in our area today, reflecting on the current political climate. Sophia, do they feel as though those conversations have helped at all?
Yeah, Dan, lawmakers tell me that some safety improvements came from the tragedy last year, but they don't feel that the violent political rhetoric has slowed down at all. And while the incident happened here in Minnesota, they also feel it reflects a larger national trend. Lawmakers here in Duluth and across the border in Wisconsin say they're concerned about the direction things are headed. Duluth Representative Pete Johnson says he feels fortunate to feel relatively safe in his position, as that's not the case for other lawmakers.
I know some of my colleagues have their lives threatened on a regular basis.
Johnson acknowledges there's some inherent risk to public office, but says the current level is unacceptable.
So that's really what we have to fight back against, is remember that the folks who are serving these positions, whether you agree with them or not, are human beings.
Minnesota increased security at the Capitol following Melissa Hortman's death. But with violent rhetoric running rampant, there's only so much the state can do. Wisconsin State Representative Angela Stroud of Ashland says it was a wake-up call to all legislators.
But after the shootings in Minnesota last year, all of us got really scared. And, we all thought about our protection plans. This was something all of my colleagues and I were talking about. We all installed cameras if we didn't already have them.
Stroud feels a large part of the issue is language used by leaders.
I think that we need to hold people accountable who use language that promotes violence. And we hold them accountable at the ballot box.
Johnson adding that accountability must continue at all levels to push back against violence in words and actions.
And that's kind of where we have to really have that concerted effort from not just legislators, but from everybody to say, like, hey, we're not willing to accept this type of talk anymore. And because we've seen that it isn't just talk to some people.
Both lawmakers say they feel confident in the security at their state's Capitol buildings. They do acknowledge that there's a limit to how locked down they can be, as they need to balance security with accessibility to the public they serve. Live in Duluth, Sophia Lauber, Northern News Now.